Hello, everyone. My name is Todd Wright. I'm Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Progress. Welcome to today's webinar, What Happens to Salesforce Data When You Acquire a Company? Before we begin, I have a couple housekeeping slides to show you all. The first is the webinar control panel and how you can participate. First, to open and hide your control panel, you'll want to click on the orange highlighted arrow at the top, shown right here. And there are two options for joining audio. To use voice over IP, simply select computer audio under audio, or to dial in using your phone, select phone call and dial in using the numbers and information provided. Lastly, all lines will be muted for today's session, but we are going to be taking questions throughout the presentation, mostly towards the end of the presentation, which will have a live Q&A. If you have any questions at any time during this webinar, simply submit your question via the questions panel. We will address all questions at the end of the presentation. If we run out of time during the event, we will get back to anyone who asks a question after this webinar. And final note, we are recording the session and you will receive a copy as soon as it is available. So with that all said, let's start by quickly introducing today's speakers. First off is Justin Donlan. Justin is the Vice President of Enterprise Applications at Progress. He is an experienced technology executive driven to achieve strategic goals through best-of-breed teams, methodologies, and applications. He has deep technical expertise in lead-to-cash, application integrations, analytics engineering, data modeling and analytics, and corporate IT. Justin is passionate about crafting the strategy and driving the execution of extra large transformation initiatives. He is also a prolific writer, YouTuber, and speaker at industry events such as Dreamforce and Informatica World, focusing on technical leadership and productivity. Second, we have Aaron Berg. Aaron has been a principal solutions engineer with Progress for over 6 years. He has worked in the IT space for over 25, mainly working in network administration and data connectivity. His primary focus today is on bridging the gap between data and analytics by using open standards such as ODBC, JDBC, and OData/REST. His broad expertise has allowed him to be a valuable resource for customers looking to implement Progress Data Direct connectivity solutions. I'm really excited to have both Justin and Aaron with us today, and I'll now turn it over to Justin to start the discussion. Thank you both.
Great, thank you very much. It's really good to be speaking with our audience today around a topic that many find exciting and many also find quite terrifying, and that's the topic of Salesforce migrations. And now this becomes it's a rite of passage for any person in the tech world who's worked on Salesforce. To be able to work through a Salesforce migration really is a rite of passage in the Salesforce career, and something that I've gone through a number of times and I'm pretty excited to talk about, because there are so many different approaches and different techniques that you can take when you think about a Salesforce migration. So rather than diving into all the different approaches that one might take or the technology strategies, what I'd like to do is talk about our approach at Progress. Now, our growth strategy as a company is through M&A, it is through merger and acquisition, which means that we are conducting acquisitions and therefore migrations as a regular part of our business. That means we have to do it efficiently. We have to do it well. It has to become a repeatable process for us, and we can't, start with a fresh drawing board or start with a clean slate every time we think about a migration and think, all right, what's our strategy going to be? What's our approach going to be? Because we have to have a repeatable approach so that we can do 1, 2, 3 migrations a year. Now, for those who haven't gone through a Salesforce migration, it can easily take up to a year, sometimes 2 years, depending on the complexity of the migration and all the different business processes and pieces of technology in that stack. So if you think of Salesforce, there's everything from lead management, marketing automation, how leads come into Salesforce. There's the account management, mapping together a holistic view of our blended account base from the original company and the company that's been acquired. There's our opportunity management, the pipeline management, and then you can get into things like CPQ, configure price quote, order management, deal management, etc. And then, of course, customer success and technical support, which all fall into this really complex ecosystem, which just has a profound amount of data, which is usually not standardized from one company to another. So as we think about Salesforce migrations, what is our approach? I've put 3 simple bullets over here. Now, the bullets might be simple, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the work is simple. But this is what I want to talk through. Number 1 is, if we're going to be experts at data migration and Salesforce migrations, one of the things that we have to draw a hard line on at some point in the process is our gold standard business process. And the line there really is around standard. We have to standardize. I've gone through a couple of Salesforce instances where we wanted to consolidate into one Salesforce instance from 2 separate ones, but instead of rationalizing business processes, we did what's called a lift and shift. In other words, we took all the unique business processes from one instance and we built those into our standard instance. So we had one Salesforce instance, but it had 2 completely different sets of business processes in it. So it was almost like 2 completely separate companies working in their own unique ways in one Salesforce instance. Now, you can get away with that maybe one time, but the moment you get a 3rd or a 4th acquisition and you try and follow that same model, you quickly start building up what we would call technical debt, or a huge amount of complexity, which becomes very unwieldy over time. So my encouragement to anybody who's thinking about repeated M&A is to map out a gold standard tech stack, technology stack, in other words, the tools that we're using, and a gold standard set of business processes. So what do I mean by the technology stack? Well, every company that we acquire has probably built up a library or a catalog of SaaS tools that they use in their lead to cash stack. So they might use SalesLoft, or they might use Outreach. They might be using something like ZoomInfo or LeadSpace, or they might have something completely different. What we want to do as a company is say, when it comes to outreach to prospective customers, we're going to use this tool. Doesn't matter what you've used previously, this is what we use. And there'll be a little bit of an argument when you acquire the company, and they'll say, well, we really like tool X. This is what we've built our business on. And there needs to be a standard that says that's fine, but here at this company, this is the tool we use for that purpose. And you migrate onto that tool. So that's around the tech stack. If we think of business process, when I think of business process, I think of processes like our lead management. So when a lead comes into our system, how do we label the different statuses of those leads? What is the behavior that we expect from our sales reps when they work on that lead? Now, from one business to another, they might say, well, I prefer to call my leads new, in progress, and converted. And another business might say, oh, no, we're a lot more refined. We have 7 different statuses that we work across our leads. What you have to do for the sake of maintaining a clean and scalable environment is pick one standard and map to that gold standard. Same could be true for opportunities. We think of opportunities, that's the key record that we use for managing our pipeline and actually ushering deals through that pipeline. What I've seen in the past is that every company that we acquire, and perhaps every product within the companies that gets acquired, they get their own opportunity record type. And because each product would say, well, we've got a different selling motion. We've got a very different approach to how we talk to our customers, etc. And the temptation is to say, all right, well, we'll let you keep that uniqueness, and so you land up with 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 different opportunity record types with different stages within those opportunity record types, which becomes so incredibly difficult to maintain over time, especially as you have automation, validation rules, triggers, and ultimately reporting that needs to come out of those opportunities. So number 1, map to a gold standard. Set it, defend it, improve it, and map to that from the acquired company to the primary Salesforce instance. Once you've done that, Then I think the second thing that we need to do when we think about our Salesforce migrations is we need to minimize the amount of data that we want to migrate into our primary Salesforce instance. You know, a Salesforce instance is kind of like a tool shed or a toolbox. You know, you collect, the analogy is that people collect bits and pieces of tools and leftovers and screws and nuts and bolts, and they never want to get rid of them because they think they're going to need it at some point in the future, and it just builds up a huge amount of clutter. And Salesforce is sometimes the same. You know, Salesforce is a breeding ground for useless data and useless information, but we don't want to let it go. And it takes a stance of courage and conviction that says you might have 7, 8, 20 years worth of data that you've built up in your Salesforce instance. We are not going through the effort of migrating all of that legacy historical data into our Salesforce instance, our primary Salesforce instance. And there's a number of reasons why. Number one, the field mapping exercise that you have to go through to map from the old instance, the acquired instance into the primary instance, that is a time-consuming exercise. The data rationalization, the cardinality of the data, the relationships of the data, trying to stitch together accounts and contacts and opportunities, opportunity product lines, activities, etc. This is a massive data exercise. And what you'll often find is that Salesforce teams don't necessarily have the right tool sets or even experience or skill sets to be able to do that very heavy data migration work. And so it becomes possible, but not efficient. And at the end of the day, my experience is that you don't usually get the value from that historical data relative to the amount of effort that you go through to create it or to migrate it in the first place. Our position is that we want to migrate just enough data to be able to transact moving forward. Transact being the key word. So that means a sliver of lead data, our account data and our contact data, without bringing across all of the historical legacy accounts and contacts, which maybe bought from us 10 years ago, but we haven't touched since then. We want to just bring across the accounts and contacts that we need in order to transact moving forward. Same with opportunities. We don't want to bring across all old closed won or even closed lost or even open opportunities. We want to just bring the minimum amount of open opportunities that we need to transact moving forward. So that's a philosophy which gets applied and measured against every data element that is resident in the acquired system, whether that system is Salesforce, SalesLoft, NetSuite, ServiceNow, Zendesk, whatever it is. We want to bring across just the minimum amount of data into our new instance. And the temptation is always to bring as much as we can, but we need to resist that temptation. So then what do we do? That brings us to the third point, is that, okay, maybe I was being a bit facetious when I said that a lot of the data that we have in the acquired instance is not as valuable as I think it is. But the truth is there is some valuable information. And at some point, somebody is going to say, oh, we need to go back to the last 3 years because there's a specific deal or a specific customer or a use case where we need to go back to that historical information. So we don't want to just throw it out or leave it behind. We need to put it somewhere. So where do we put it? The most obvious place to put it is to offboard that data from the acquired instance set of systems into a data warehouse. And that can be a Snowflake or a SQL Server, whatever it is that you use, but put it into a data warehouse and then store that data there for historical reference. Now, there's a number of things that you can do with that data. You can just have it resident there for lookup as needed. You could put a reporting tool on top of it or a data discovery tool on top of it. But one of the things that becomes really valuable is that you can pick and choose subsets of that data that you can virtualize in your primary Salesforce instance, so that it is available real time and in context without having to actually go through the effort of migrating that data. Now, this is a really powerful feature that is becoming more and more prevalent in the Salesforce environment as tools making this ability easier to access. And this is what we're going to be demonstrating today. So virtualizing legacy data for historical reference. So let me give you an example. I spoke about opportunities. Opportunities, especially closed won, and some might say closed lost opportunities, that is some of the most valuable information that we might have in our Salesforce instance. That shows the history of a customer's interactions with us. It shows a history of their purchases, of how they've interacted with us, what they've purchased, how much they've purchased it for, etc. And we don't want to lose that information. That information might be paired up with the actual invoices that are tied to those opportunities. Now, again, I'm drawing a hard line and I'm saying I'm not migrating legacy opportunities into my Salesforce instance because I can't transact on those. And if we go back to my philosophy, I only bring information that's going to enable me to transact into the future. But I want to be able to access it, and I want our sales reps to be able to look back over previous opportunities at an account so that they can get a full view of what that account looks like. So let's make a plan and utilize tools to be able to virtualize that legacy opportunity data and even legacy invoice data in our Salesforce instance. Underneath the account, we can show that information without having to go through the effort of migrating that data. So what I'm going to do now is hand over to Aaron, who's actually going to show an example using tools that are readily available that allow us to really fast track the process of virtualizing legacy data in our Salesforce instance without the need to migrate it. Aaron, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Justin. That was a great way to line this up. So over here on the data direct side with Progress, we have a solution called our hybrid data pipeline, which is a lightweight data gateway. And it's going to let us accomplish what Justin talked about in terms of virtualizing external data and making it available in Salesforce without having to move it there. It can access the data wherever it lives, whether it's on-prem, in the cloud, doesn't really matter. Could be a data warehouse, Snowflake, Google BigQuery, could be a SQL server, could be a REST source. So really, and any data, wherever it lives, we can make that accessible from Salesforce. And you don't need to move the data, which gives you the single source of truth, as well as not complicating or even like bringing a lot of extra things into your Salesforce instance. And then we can access it even if there isn't a network connection to it, a direct VPN or SSH tunnel. So on day one of that acquisition, before IT even has a chance to get everything hooked up with different VPNs or network connections, we have an agent that lets you get access to that data immediately. Some features inside of our hybrid data pipeline. It's a bit of a Swiss Army knife, solves a lot of different use cases, but in this case, we're really working with our OData support. So hybrid data pipeline supports the OData v4 standard, which is what Salesforce uses to connect to external data sources. If you're not familiar, OData was developed by Microsoft back in 2007, so it's been around quite a while, and it's an OASIS standard. Really, it's SQL over REST. So it's a REST API with a rich metadata document that describes the available data, including field names, data types, field lengths. All that information is in the metadata. It's also widely supported across the industry. You'll see it in BI tools, everything from Excel to Power BI and Tableau to Salesforce. So makes it very easy to use in this use case. And then one final feature I like to point out that hybrid data pipeline brings to this is our data source grouping feature. And Salesforce offers this ability to connect to external data on a per endpoint basis with their Salesforce Connect feature. And they, of course, charge for that on a per endpoint. So we've actually enabled a way to group different endpoints together so that they can be accessible to Salesforce as if they were a single endpoint. And I've included a link here to a tutorial I put together a little while back on using data source groups to help you save some money through this process. So to deploy hybrid data pipeline, it's really a one-click or next finish type installation. We support Docker, so can bring it up very quickly in a Docker environment. We also have a bin file installation for use on Linux servers, support high availability for load balancing and fault tolerance. And again, I've provided a link here to a prior webinar that goes through spinning up that trial. So for the demo, I'm going to go through a few different things. We're going to take a look at configuring hybrid data pipeline to access a remote database, or in this case, that will be a SQL server. We're going to REST or OData enable that database. configure Salesforce to access that OData endpoint. And then I'll take you through a few slides of how I configured Salesforce to display that as part of the account record. So you'll see on the drawing I have up on the screen, on the left, the on-premises connector is the piece that we're going to have installed on the remote SQL server. So in this case, I don't have direct network access to that SQL server, so we're relying on that agent to create outbound SSL connectivity to the hybrid data pipeline. And we don't need to worry again about opening ports or VPNs. Hybrid data pipeline can connect directly to do that as well once those network connections are in place. So really works either way. And then we're going to connect Salesforce to that through a HTTPS connection. So let's hop over to hybrid data pipeline. Let's go ahead and log in here. So I'm going to log into my hybrid data pipeline that I have running in what I would call our primary company, our master company. Once we're in here, you're going to see lots of different features, things like multi-tenancy, users, and roles. What we're going to focus on today is connecting to data sources. So if I click on new data source, you're going to see a wide range of data sources. I'll scroll through here just to give you an idea of the breadth of sources that we support. Everything from, like I said, SQL Server to SAP to Snowflake, Google BigQuery, Oracle, you name it. We can even connect to Salesforce in a different org and bring that data in. So lots of options. When we go back, I've already created a connection to that on-prem SQL server. So you'll see set a data source name, credentials to the database, and I'm using this connector ID. So that connector ID is tied to the on-prem agent that I've installed. So here I have this on-prem agent that I mentioned earlier. If we run a test, you'll see we're connected up from that remote SQL Server data warehouse to the hybrid data pipeline. I also have that SQL Server running here. I've created a view with some legacy billing data. So if we do a select on that, you'll see we can bring back some of that data. So now going back to hybrid data pipeline, if I do a test connect here, you'll see we successfully established our connection. And now we're going to OData enable that or REST enable that. So here, when I click on edit and view, you'll see the legacy billing view is selected. You'll see all of the columns that are available. We can change our plural and singular naming for the legacy billing view. We can also set aliases on any of the columns that are here to make it a little bit more user-friendly when it gets into Salesforce. So with that in place, we end up with an OData endpoint. We can bring back that data just right here in a browser. So very easy to bring back the JSON document and see everything that is coming back. This is legacy billing information that is in the data warehouse. So we'll take that URL now and we can bring that into Salesforce. So if we hop over to Salesforce, we go to setup, let's go to our external data. You'll see I have a legacy account. So we're going to go ahead and click edit on that. And I've created this connection to that URL here using OData v4. This is a full CRUD solution, so I actually have write enabled. You don't have to do that, so it's up to you. I'm authenticating currently just using password authentication. We do support OAuth 2 as well for environments that require that. So with that in place, if we come back over to our external objects, you're going to see I have a legacy billings object. You'll see the field labels and then the relationship to the external object here. So in this case, you'll see how we've mapped over like customer names comes across straight across and all these different custom fields are mapped. That all happens more or less automatically when you create the external object connection. So if we come back to our sales page in here, I've created a tab to take a look at this data. So if we go up to legacy billings, you'll see all that data coming back from the SQL server. You'll see the URL to show you that. So all that information is right here. It's not being stored in Salesforce, but it gives you access to it on demand when you need it. Now, one other thing that I wanted to show was how to configure Salesforce with an indirect lookup so that you can see the external data as part of an account record. So in order to do that, I've created an external ID and mapped that to the customer transaction ID field. I included a link here to some more documentation on that from Salesforce. This is what it looks like in the configuration. You create an external ID field. It has to be unique, and we set an external ID checkbox here to tell it Salesforce to use that for lookups. And then here you'll see where we map the external customer transaction ID field to the custom external ID field that I created in the account object. So with that in place, if we come back over to Salesforce and we go to our accounts, and I go to one of these customers, you'll see I have a legacy billings field at the top. And within that, you're going to see the external ID and all that information coming back that's relevant to this AB Partners account. So it makes it very easy for someone who brings up this account to see the external information that they need. So with that, I think I'm gonna send it back over to Todd for any questions that we have.